My name is Jim Bish with the Americans in Wartime Experience, and today's date is August 13th, 2023, and I'm conducting an interview with Margaret E. Gilley in Brandy Station, Virginia at the airport. Margaret, could you please give me your full name and where you were born?
Margaret Ethel Rankin Gilley. I was born in Washington, D.C.
Okay. And what did your parents do, and what were they doing in Washington, D.C. in the 1930s?
My mother originally was from a farming family in Maryland. My father was born and raised in New England. He was self-employed. He was a painter. And my mother just picked up different jobs. She wasn't trained in anything in particular, but she worked for People's Drug Store and in the candy department and
Okay.
things of that nature.
Did your dad then? What did he when he painted? Was he doing a variety of jobs or certain types of painting that he was involved with?
I can remember that he would mix his paint. It didn't come pre-mixed. People would pick out a color and they'd say, I want this color in my kitchen or bathroom or bedroom. And he would come up with that particular color by mixing the various colors.
Mm-hmm. And so he helped paint a lot of insides of homes.
Yes.
Places like that. So you were born in 1931. Obviously, you do not remember the Depression coming on, but you were born in the Depression.
Yes.
What was that like? Did that impact your dad's paint job or your mother's job at all, growing up or living in the early 1930s?
Well, we always seemed to have enough food on the table because my mother would get food from the farm in Virginia. Mm-hmm. And sometimes my father would have work and sometimes he wouldn't. But I can always remember that we always had food on the table.
Uh-huh.
And asking for a couple of pennies and a nickel was a big deal.
Yeah.
Because, kids like candy or things of that nature.
Yeah. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I have one sister, and she's still living. She's 94 years old, and she lives in Maryland now.
Okay. Well, that's good. So you both were growing up there, obviously growing up in the Depression.
Yes.
What school did you attend when you were in Washington, D.C.?
Truesdale Elementary School, Paul Junior High School in Brightwood, and then Roosevelt High School in Petworth.
Okay. And you were born in 1931, so that means that when you were about 10 years old, probably in upper elementary school, war came to America. Do you remember any of the changes that you went through or your parents might have gone through that you saw the difference from your life before Pearl Harbor to after Pearl Harbor?
Well, I can remember grocery shopping. And since I was the more responsible child in the family, my sister was a spendthrift, my mother would send me to the grocery store with a list and a little wagon to carry the groceries back and forth. And I would have the ration book because meat was rationed, sugar and butter and things of that nature. And she trusted me to do that. And now it just overwhelms me to go into the store and see all the produce and the canned goods that are available.
Yeah. So you were roughly about 10 years old when your mother was trusting you to go with a ration book and
Right.
different things like that to do things. She knew that you would bring home exactly what she wanted and
Yes.
not extras.
Right. And she knew that I love fruit. And she says, no, always get home, bring the fruit with you. She didn't have to tell me twice.
Yeah, and that was good. Fruit was good.
Yes,
So,
yes.
So the ration books, what were they like, and how did you obtain ration stamps? Do you remember?
I don't remember how my mother got them. I don't know whether she had to go pick them up or whether they were mailed to her. I just don't remember that.
Yeah. Do you remember, did your family own an automobile?
We didn't have an automobile.
Okay, so gas wasn't an issue really, as far as needing enough gas to go somewhere for work.
And it was amazing. At first we didn't have an automobile, but then later on we did get an automobile. And I can't remember how my father would go to work. Maybe he just worked in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I just don't remember that.
Did your mom, the store that she worked at, was it really close to your home? Did she walk to work, or do you remember?
Now that I don't remember. My sister and I, we never had a babysitter, but we had neighbors on both sides of us. We lived in a row house. On one side were an old family from Greece, and the other side it was an old family from Italy. And if we did anything wrong, my mother knew about it because they would tell on us. So we knew we had to do right.
Yeah. So, do you remember President Roosevelt?
Yes. Yes.
What do you remember about him? Did your family like him or not like him, or how was all of that in your neighborhood?
Well, I don't think my family were Democrats, but they liked the things that Roosevelt was doing, and so they supported him.
Yeah. Did you notice was there a lot more children attending school after the war started? Because I'm assuming there was a lot of people that were employed in wartime economy in Washington, D.C. area. Did you notice any of that in school with a lot of new students arriving or things like that?
No, they were local students. I remember the air raid wardens coming around. We'd have mock drills, and you'd have to cover your windows up. Couldn't have any light showing from the windows.
So you would do that on a regular basis in the school? Do have an air raid drill?
Yes.
That type of thing. Do you remember any of the older brothers or sisters of your classmates going off to war? Anybody that was close to your family that was enlisting in the armed services at that time?
Not. I did have some uncles, 3 uncles, and they all. I had more uncles than that because my mother came from a family of 15. But these 3 were younger, and 2 joined the Air Force and 1 joined the Army.
Do you remember things getting a lot more patriotic, doing things at school that was a lot more patriotic than earlier?
Yes.
And what were some of those things?
Well, like collecting war saving stamps to save enough stamps to get a bond, and collecting scrap iron, walking through the alleys, going in people's trash cans, and pulling out tin cans and anything that could be used to melt down in the war.
Yeah. Did you you went through people's trash cans and pulled that out? And where did you deliver those to? Did they have a scrap metal place close to your home?
At the movies.
Really?
We would take our collection of scrap iron, and if you had so many pounds, you could get in free. And so every Saturday we try to go to the movies for free.
So that's where they had their weights and measures and all that stuff set up.
Yes.
It's interesting. Did the movies change at all? Were the movies different when the war was going on that you can remember, as far as what you saw? Were they more geared towards the war effort?
Yes,
or do you remember?
they were very patriotic. Shorts, short movies, and basically it was cowboys, shoot 'em up, bang bangs.
Yeah.
That was good on Saturday morning.
Yeah. Did your sister participate in some of the things that you were participating in, as far as collecting
Well,
cans and
my mother had a rule. If we went someplace together, we had to stay together and come home together. So, and she didn't always like what I liked. And if she wanted to leave, I had to leave.
Yeah, yeah. Did she pick up tin cans and stuff like you did?
Yes, yes.
So you both were trying to get into the movies.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that was a good incentive, trying to get into the picture show every week by collecting and supporting the war effort.
Yep. Yeah.
Did you collect any rubber or anything like that? Any tires or anything like that that students were collecting?
No, but I got in trouble trying on some hats that were in the trash, and I got some cooties from that.
Really?
That was quite an ordeal. My mother sent me out in the country so that my aunt could deal with me, and she'd have to use this shampoo and little fine comb.
Yeah. You learn not to put anything on your head after that. So when you were 10, so you went through most of your education years were during the war years then.
Yes.
Yes. Did anything change? Did you notice any changes in your life beyond a little more patriotism concerning the war effort?
I think people were more positive about winning the war and doing things to make things better. A lot of things weren't available, and you made do with what you had. And so I think, and there wasn't a lot of criticism of the war either. So that to me is a good thing.
Everybody was supporting
Yes.
the war effort.
Yes.
And that's, you remember, I kind of asked you this a little bit before with the changes, but Washington, D.C. brought a lot of people in for the war effort. You know,
Yes.
there were all kinds of office helpers brought in, and military personnel were brought in. Do you remember seeing a lot of that around the streets of Washington, D.C. when you were growing up?
Young girls came to Washington to work in the government offices, and living was at a premium. The apartments weren't available, and we had like I said, a row house, and it was the second story. And so what my father did, he converted the second story into an apartment.
Okay.
And then we rented it out to 2 government girls. And downstairs, they gave up their bedroom and made the dining room into a bedroom. And my sister and I lived on an enclosed back porch and didn't have any heat, and it was cold. But we had a bathroom downstairs, and that's how we helped out during the war, is supplying a place for these young girls to live.
It sounds like you helped a lot of people out. Your family probably got a little bit of income from that extra
Yes.
bedroom space.
Yes.
And which was helping your family out, but certainly helping the housing situation with a lot of the people coming to D.C. without housing.
Right, because we were right on the streetcar line on Georgia Avenue, and transportation was cheap and reliable, and it was good.
Yeah. Did you befriend? Did any of the people that stayed in your house, did they talk to you very much, or did you become friends with any of those older girls, young women?
While they were there, yes, but after they left, we lost all contact.
Yeah. Did some of the girls stay there for 2 or 3 years? Were they there for a long term?
Yes, yes.
All the time they were working, so you got to know them fairly well while they were there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably common, I'm assuming. A lot of your neighbors were probably doing similar things, creating space in their homes for people to live or have bedrooms.
Well, not on our particular street. I didn't know of anybody.
But you housed then in your own home 2 or 3 extra people stayed
Yes.
there during the war effort.
Yes,
You know what they were doing?
just working in
the
a
offices.
government office. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know where they'd come from? How far they'd
They
come?
were from out of town,
Uh-huh.
and I probably at that time knew what state they were from, but I don't remember now.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the thing that was going on that not a lot of people realized, that people were making extra room space for all they needed people that were coming in to help with the war effort. How about men? Do you remember a lot more uniformed personnel walking the streets and things like that when you were going to school?
No, I don't.
How far were you away from school? Did you have to walk to school?
The elementary school was just 2 or 3 blocks away. The junior high school was at least 10 blocks away. And the senior high school, it was more than a mile away. But we were given tickets to ride the streetcar. But I saved my tickets for other things.
So did you walk to school then and
Yes.
saving your tickets?
Yes.
So you had to start a little earlier in the morning
Yes.
to get to school.
But I mean, walking was something that you didn't think about. I mean, you just went ahead and did it.
Everybody was walking.
Everybody was walking, yes.
And gas was at a premium, so you couldn't drive much anyway. You know, the streetcars obviously. But
Yes.
I'm sure that was. So when you were at school, did the school have anything going on to support the war effort? Specifically things that you did in the school? Were there any
Well, they were cadets that, you know, among the boys.
were there any like food drives or scrap drives that were originated in the school that you participate in, or did they do anything like that you can remember?
Not that I can remember.
So
We
this-
did it on our own as an
Uh-huh.
individual.
Yeah, I thought, you know, sometimes some different schools would kind of, you know,
Yes.
push for their students to do something like that.
Hmm.
And did you remember any programs where anybody came into the school and talked about the war or what was going on? Anything like that occurred?
I can't bring anything to mind.
That's fine. When you were at school, obviously you were still in school when the war ended.
Yes.
What was that experience like when you heard, when your neighborhood or your parents or you heard that the war was ending?
Well, at that time, I was staying out in the country with one of my uncles and aunt, and it was rural and farmland, and I don't know how we got the word, but everybody was walking in the middle of the road up and down, just celebrating the end of the war.
Did you listen? Obviously, there was no television back then.
No.
Did you get most of your news from the radio, and
Yes.
could you describe what that was like?
Well, Sunday night was really a family night for us, where we would turn the radio on and get the news and listen to the old programs, Amos and Andy, and you know, a lot of old characters.
That was in Friday night?
That was on Sunday nights.
Oh, Sunday night, okay.
Sunday nights.
Did you all go to church on Sunday morning?
My parents did not go, but they saw that my sister and I went regardless. Yes, we walked to church.
Did the church do anything special that you can remember during those years in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I'm sorry to say I wasn't too interested.
Yeah.
I mean, because I was forced to go.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't want to go, but I went.
But so you can't really remember the church doing any special
No.
events either,
No.
as far as your wartime experience. Were you ever short of food in your family during the war years? Was that different than it was the pre-years? You mentioned earlier that you always had
We
food on your
always
table.
had food because it came from the farm. And so, but I can remember one particular dinner, we just had carrots. I didn't like carrots, but I ate carrots because that was all there was.
Yeah. Did your parents raise a garden or anything like that during the war years?
No, no. We used to have people that would come around in carts and sell things from their cart. We bought our ice from a cart. We had an ice box, and you could buy a chunk of ice for 25 cents. The watermelon man came around, and you'd pick out a watermelon, he'd plug it for you. If it was good, you bought it. I don't know what happened if it wasn't good. So yes, there were a lot of people just walking the streets selling things
Selling
from
their wares.
Yes.
where was it that you got your vegetables? You said it was a rural area. Did one of your relatives' farms?
Yes, my mother's folks had a farm in Fairland, Maryland.
Okay.
And
so they obviously had a pretty good garden.
Yes.
And things that they were growing to share with the family.
Yes.
Did your mother and father, were they out of work at all during that time, or were they pretty busy that you know of as far as working?
Well, there were times when they didn't have a job. They were around the house.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when Germany surrendered and versus Japan surrendering? Do you remember any of those particular times, which would have been Germany in May of 1945?
Not so much, no.
But when the whole war was over with, you remember
Yes.
that more. Do you remember them talking about the atomic bomb? Dropping of the atomic bomb?
The pros and the cons, yes. Yes, among my mother's people.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And you remember them talking about dropping the bomb, which really caused the surrender of Japan?
Right.
You remember that? Did they discuss that much at school or anything? Or
Not
they
in
kept away
school,
from that?
no. Mm-hmm.
Kept away from that
Yes.
material.
Mm-hmm.
So you were in what, middle school, junior high when the war ended, or were you in high school?
I graduated in January of 1950.
Okay.
I was kept back a half of a year because my father went to Norfolk to be a policeman on the naval base down there, and we moved to Norfolk for 1 year, and I didn't do well in school down there. So when we moved back to Washington, I was a half a year behind. So, and I liked that because instead of being a whole year behind, I was just a half a year behind, because you could start in January or you could start in September, depending on when your birthday was.
Well, that was good. A lot of schools wouldn't do that.
No, nowadays they don't. If your birthday is in October, you have to wait till the following year.
Yeah, yeah. Do you remember when President Roosevelt was killed? Do you remember when he died? Wasn't killed, I should say, when he died. Because they had a big funeral going through Washington, D.C. I was just wondering if you remember anything about that.
No.
Do you remember President Truman
Yes.
coming on board?
Yes. I remember that he had to move out of the White House because they were renovating the White House, and he moved to Blair House. And I can remember when there was a threat on his life, and he was a couple of men tried to kill him. I can remember that. And they said that he wasn't going to be a good president because he was in the shadows of Roosevelt. But in my opinion, I think he did very well in conducting the country and getting it moving again.
Yeah, he had a lot on his shoulders at the end of the war.
Yes, and he stepped up to the front and did what he had to do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he made some pretty tough decisions there at the end.
Yes.
Do you remember, you mentioned that the girls were in your house for 3 years. Do you remember a lot of people then leaving after the war was over with?
Yes, they did. Yes, they moved back home.
And I'm sure that had an impact on Washington, D.C. with all the people, how busy it was, and then it became more like normal again.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When did your parents get an automobile? Was that right after the war?
Yes.
Or was that later?
My mother took a job the latter part of the war at the U.S. Post Office. And she took the place of a man that joined to go into the service, so that when he came back, she lost her job. But during the war, she saved her money. And after the war was over, she was able to buy, and it was a Ford, 1949, I think, Ford, or 48, might even be a 47, I think. But anyhow, and she had learned to drive in her younger years, but my father had to teach her to drive all over again. And so he did. And at that time I was 16. So after my mother got a permit, I asked her if I could learn how to drive. And she surprised me and said yes. And she trusted me with her car. And so my father, he taught me how to drive, and I got my permit at 16.
Yeah, well, that's good. So just kind of wrapping things up, what is your what do you remember most, and as concerning the war years, that you were most proud of when you were a student coming through Washington, D.C.? Is there anything that you remember of being proud of participating in?
Like I said, everybody was patriotic, and there wasn't any criticism. I mean, everybody was trying to do their best for the war, and in whatever way they could help. Yeah. But now there just seems to be contradictions, criticism. It's hard to live with now.
It's a different world, that's for sure.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Well, thank you, Margaret, for your interview and for your time. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.